when you wanna get off the ride. Shout when you wanna get off the ride. Shout when you wanna get off the ride, 'cause you're gonna...
Hey everybody, welcome to the Smoke Break. I'm your host, Alex Crockman. Remember, where there's smoke, there is fire. The week of July 3rd, the week we celebrate the birth of the land of the free, was a grim reminder of just how dire things are in this country. The terrible bloodshed that occurred in a 48-hour period would make one think that our newscasts were that of a third world country. This grim week started out with the shooting by police of Alton Sterling, a 37-year-old black man who allegedly flashed a pistol at a homeless person in front of a convenience store in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Police responded to a 911 call placed by the yet-to-be-identified homeless man. Shortly after the officers arrived on the scene, Sterling was dead. Sterling, who had a multitude of run-ins with the law, had been regularly selling CDs in front of the Triple S Food Mart for years without any issue. Store owner Abdullah Mufali, who had been friends with Sterling for years, had not witnessed any altercation between Alton Sterling and a homeless man that evening, and has been on record as saying that the alleged behavior of Sterling that night was very out of character. So far, there is not one shred of evidence that the responding officers had any knowledge of Sterling's prior offenses, including illegal possession of a firearm, battery, domestic violence, and carnal knowledge of a juvenile. However, if they had this information upon arriving on the scene, it's not clear how it would have affected the outcome, as officers of the law are only supposed to use deadly force as a last resort. But Sterling's gun never left his pocket. As we await more facts to come out, because the video of two men holding a man down while being tased apparently isn't enough to go on right now, some folks in the media have chosen to focus on Sterling's checkered past and use it as a justification for the responding officers to use deadly force. Character disparagement is not the only tool used by these so-called contrarian commentators. Another popular argument to counter the outrage over excessive force is, we need to wait for all the facts. Comedian and YouTube personality Steve Crowder calls for the public to do just that in a video called "Let's Hate All Cops, Facts Are Racist." Now you can watch the entire video on Steve Crowder's YouTube page called Louder with Crowder, and you can see it in its full context. Comment below and let us know if we're taking it the wrong way.
Facts are racist things.
So edgy, yet so douchey.
When the Sterling shooting happened, I tweeted out, actually a series of tweets, that we should wait for the facts to come in before we rush to judgment. I've always done that when these situations occur, and it was met with outrage.
The video, from two different angles, shows the police holding a man down, then executing him at point-blank range. Unless we're waiting for a new law to come out that we don't know about, that gives police the power of judge, jury, and executioner, your tweets are offensive at the very least because of their ignorance.
If that's the case, with Sterling, we have a little bit more information. Now, yes, it's true that Sterling was a convicted sex offender. Yes, it's true that he did time. Someone had called in a report of him threatening them with a gun, and it seems like he had a gun on him at the time he was resisting arrest. None of that was initially reported. Let's assume that none of that is true.
Let's assume that none of that matters, as it does not give the police the right to execute somebody.
A gun around, they get a call, they show up, there's a big man who's resisting arrest, they find a gun on him in a scuffle, and he ends up getting shot. Now, is it possible that mistakes were made across the board? Of course.
Oh, it's very possible that mistakes were made, and if you mean across the board, and that board being the two police officers who had a man fully subdued with no weapon in his hand, then yes, mistakes were clearly made. Big mistakes. We have the facts on it now. We see the video. Sterling was murdered. These facts have come out.
Is it possible that the police in this situation were grossly negligent and acting outside of the parameters of their job? Absolutely. Is it possible that even if all of those things were true, this could be a very unfortunate incident where a loss of life did not need to occur, but these cops aren't racists who set their clock to go shoot a black guy? Of course.
No, it's not possible that mistakes were made. And this was not a possible unnecessary loss of life. This is what actually happened. Also, facts about the officers are indeed out. Both of them, between the two officers, have been investigated 5 times for excessive force before the incident happened. Blaine Salmoni has been under investigation twice for the use of excessive force, and Officer Howie Blake was put on administrative leave while being investigated for the shooting of a man named Kevin Knight. He shot him 6 times. Oh, and by the way, Kevin Knight happened to be black.
Does someone deserve to die because they have a gun on them and they're resisting arrest? They possibly reach for a cop's gun? No, that's not the ideal scenario, but that person did not find themselves in that situation because they were selling pirated Wu-Tang CDs.
See, that's interesting because there are no facts out yet as to what kind of CDs Sterling was selling, but you seem to be very confident that they were Wu-Tang albums.
Now, this kind of irrational reaction before facts come in, because it's more unreasonable for me to say, hey, let's wait for the facts to come in, leads to greater crime in areas like Baltimore and Chicago, where police are simply no longer policing the area, not only for fear of being shot or violently assaulted, because those have been on the rise, but for fear of their family and being able to provide for them because of liability purposes. They show up, they make the wrong move, someone gets offended, they get a lawsuit, they're out of a job. It happens all the time, and the crime reflects it.
Okay, so supposing Crowder can speak for all the police officers in Baltimore and Chicago, this argument is still bullshit. Last year, Laquan McDonald was shot dead by Chicago police officers in what later resulted in a criminal investigation. The video showing this shooting was withheld by the Chicago police officers in a conspiracy. They actually withheld the video from the public. And you're honestly going to sit there and tell me there should be no outrage over such instances for fear that the cops won't do their job? That's a fucking insult to every man and woman who puts the uniform on every day, to say that they won't do their job, they won't put their lives on the line for risk of getting in trouble. University of Chicago law professor Craig Futterman has a much more profound take on this. Futterman said, if we have even the slightest chance of being effective in solving violent crime, getting cooperation and help and partnership from the people in the community, there's got to be trust. Police accountability and public scrutiny is exactly what good cops need to earn that trust and become the effective officers that they ought to be. Crowder goes on to cite Tamir Rice as an example of false outrage over police excessive force.
Here's one. Hashtag Tamir Rice, holding a fake gun in a park. Again, no. Now, there were mistakes all around, of course, but you're trying to paint the narrative that a kid was shot for having a fake gun simply because he was black and an officer shot him because he was racist. That's not true. This was a kid who had a gun with the tip removed. It looked like a real gun, hanging around in a park where there is consistent gang violence, aiming it at walkers-by. Someone had called in a complaint, and police showed up while they saw someone looking around aiming a gun. Now, guess what? If the police officers didn't do anything, you now have another headline of a public shooting. Why didn't someone stop him? Could they have waited? Could they?
No! If the police officers didn't do anything, a child would still be alive. Everyone in that park would still be alive because he had a fucking plastic gun. He goes on to say that more white people are killed by police in America than black people.
Black kids, and we've all had a secret racist meeting behind their back, and only black people get shot. Except far more white people in the United States are killed by police. Now, I know what you're saying. Yes, but blacks only represent a small percent of the population, so they are disproportionately killed by police. Well, here's the problem with that. When you actually take into account police interactions or people being arrested, so an actual interaction with a police officer, white people are more likely on an individual basis to be shot by police than black people. All of these references are at louderwithcrowder.com. Click the link in the description and tell me if you think I'm wrong.
Well, Steve, we don't need to click your little link to know you're full of shit. See, fortunately for us in this world, we have a great numbers system. It's called math. Whites represent about 63% of the population, while black people represent about 12% of the population. According to the Washington Post, in 2016, 238 white people were killed by police, while 123 black people were killed by police. Yes, we understand 238 is a bigger number than 123, but that does not accurately represent the problem. About 196 million people in the US are white, while 37 million are black. That means that 0.000000121% of white people are killed by cops, opposed to 0.000000326% are killed by black people. Simply put, black people are 3 times as likely to be killed by police officers than white people.
And I want to take this back to what I started with. It is extremely troubling, and should be, to any critical thinker or rational person when the mere statement of, hey, wait, before you bring out the torch and pitchforks, let's wait for the facts to come in before executing someone through jury of public opinion.
You're not necessarily wrong here, Steve. It would be a great idea if people, say police officers, took a moment to assess all the facts in a situation and weighed all of their options before they execute someone in public. For more on this week's troubling news, we go to smoke break correspondent Xavier Lamont. Excel!
Hi, I'm Xavier Lamont. In a surprise news conference held at the White House, Jesus Christ of Nazareth announced the forthcoming rapture has been canceled and there's no plans for the reschedule. The Messiah, who's had run-ins with law enforcement in the past, cited security concerns for himself and his angels if the apocalypse were to go forth as planned. He's saying, having skin of bronze and hair of wool seems to be a hazard in many parts of the world, nowhere more so than in the United States of America. The Son of the Most High continued, attacks by law enforcement and concerned self-appointed neighborhood watch personnel on people of color have made my return unfeasible at this time. When asked if he thought all cops were dangerous, the Lamb of God joked, well, you know, I've had some experience in this area, and let me tell you, it only takes one, am I right? Christ also mentioned Congress's lack of reasonable gun legislation and no apparent new training for new members of law enforcement community as reasons for the cancellation. Making another quip to say, in my day, we only had spears, and my guys can handle spears. He ended the news conference simply stating, I just don't feel safe right now. Now, I'm going to take a moment really quickly to just give some personal thoughts. I want to share some things with people because there's a lot of confusion going on about everything that's happened recently. I want to start first with Black Lives Matter. There seems to be a little bit of misunderstanding of what it really means and what it stands for. Let me first categorically and unequivocally state that Black Lives Matter does not mean other lives don't. It is simply a need, something that came from a need from consistent and constant abuse by members of law enforcement. Now, many people will cite things like black on black crime as a reason that Black Lives Matter shouldn't exist. How can you be upset about police crime when gangbangers and drug dealers shoot up each other in black communities all the time? Well, there's two quick points there. First, I don't have the exact same respect or level for gang members and drug dealers as I do for the police. I have a higher expectation for them. They're supposed to protect us. They're not supposed to be part of the gang too. I shouldn't have to fear a police officer more than I fear a member of a gang or some drug dealer. And by the way, I know quite a few drug dealers. They're okay people. Sorry, I didn't break there. More importantly, to understand where Black Lives Matter comes from, it wasn't something that was designed to hate anyone. In fact, the clearest indication of how much Black Lives Matter isn't just about black people or isn't actually anti-police, it was seen in Dallas just last week when a horrible tragedy occurred when a lone gunman took it on himself to try to rectify matters by shooting up law enforcement. If you look at that footage, you see thousands of people in the street crying, screaming, horror. When you see the people in the street, there's no jubilation, there's no celebration, there's no joy. They're crying in the street at the loss of life of these officers who were there participating in the protests. Yes, they were there in their official capacity as law enforcement officers, but those people meant them no ill will. No one in the Black Lives Matter did. If your statements, Mr. Rudy Giuliani, or anybody who agrees that Black Lives Matter hates police or set out to endanger police, you would have seen celebration there, like Trump claims he saw after 9/11 in New Jersey. Secondly, white privilege. It's a real thing, man. I mean, I don't know how else to explain other than show you a myriad of pictures or instances where white people with guns challenge the police, not only verbally, but physically. And somehow the police always find a way to bring them in, handcuffed and alive. I'll give you two quick examples. In Pennsylvania, there was a manhunt for a man named Eric Frayne. Eric Frayne had already killed several police officers, and not only that, but hid in the wilderness and had booby traps and was considered an armed and dangerous suspect. The manhunt went on for some time, And when they found him, he was armed and threatening to kill. Yet somehow they managed to bring him in alive. Secondly, all of us remember a little standoff in Oregon when a group of men armed to the teeth actually held a nature preserve hostage. At no point did the police ever say negotiations were exhausted and our only option was to send in a suicide bomb robot. They allowed them to stay and just waited them out. Now, I'm not saying that both scenarios are equal or there's a one-to-one rationale. But when you look at what happens when police deal with white people who are armed or dangerous and black people who are armed and dangerous, there's clearly a distinction that one is a shoot-to-kill order and one is what is typically good police work. When people cite numbers like there's more white people killed by cops than black people, what they fail to mention is how many of those white people were completely unarmed and posing no threat to those officers at the time. Laquan McDonald was shot down walking down the street surrounded by police officers, and he was shot 16 times. I challenge anyone to show me a video of a white kid doing the exact same thing and being treated that way. Now, I'm not suggesting that I want white people to get shot by the cops. I don't want anybody to get shot by the cops. It'd be nice if there was a way in the magical world where no one ever got shot by the cops, but that's not realistic. Sometimes criminals are dangerous and they need to be taken down because that's the only option the police officers have. It just seems that more often than not, officers feel threatened. And let's take this to another scenario. Everyone remembers Ferguson, of course, one of the biggest powder kegs the nation's seen in the last few years, where Mike Brown challenged an officer who tried to stop him walking down the street. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of back and forth of what happened with Mike Brown and the officer, but I will talk about one part that really struck me and hit a nerve as to what is going on with the interaction between police and black men. The cop described Michael Brown as the Hulk. Think about that. This is an 18-year-old kid that he said was like the Hulk. There's two things that I can show you of that Michael Brown was not like the Hulk. One, if he was, he'd had a full ride scholarship to somewhere in the South to play football. and number two is this is a kid who, for all intents and purposes, had never had any serious run-in with the law. Okay? Notwithstanding that particular day, it's hard for me to believe that this kid, out of nowhere, charged a police officer that was armed to the teeth and did so in a fashion that he had to shoot him multiple times. But even if it's true, again, I challenge anyone to show me a video, evidence, or even just a news story of a white kid being treated the exact same way without some kind of extenuating circumstances. So the white privilege part of it is a real thing, people, whether you choose to believe it or not. Finally, what we'd really love to see happen is a situation where the community, white and black, and Hispanic and Asian and everyone, can work with the police so people can feel safe. The hardest part of everything that happened in the past week and over the past several years is I'm a father. I have an 11-year-old son, and I happen to be a pretty big guy. I'm 6'7", 300 pounds. You don't need to know exactly. And I have a kid who's 11 years old, and right now he's 5'7", 150 pounds. That's a grown man. He's a sweet kid. He's a computer nerd. He's super athletic, but has no desire or intention to ever play sports. That's fine. He's going to make billions of dollars writing some program that you're going to love 20 years from now. But here's the deal. I'm terrified for him almost every day. I've done well for myself. I live in a nice community. In fact, I'm one of the only black people who live in my neighborhood. And my son has a bunch of friends that he plays with every day. And like most little boys around that age, they're mischievous. They get into things, they get into trouble, they ride around on bikes and play. And every now and then they do something where they go a little bit too far and we got to rein them back in. My horror is that a Zimmerman or some overzealous cop sees my giant 5'7", 150-pound 11-year-old as a threat and decides to handle the situation like Tamir Rice or Trayvon Martin. So I have to have conversations with my son to explain to him while his white friends are good people and there's nothing wrong with them and he's no different than them, but he is. Because in the scenario where they get stopped by the police, the worst case scenario is that cop's going to take them home and they're going to get in trouble with their parents. The worst case scenario for my son is that I'm going to be at a news conference crying my eyes out, wondering what the fuck happened. I really hope that this can clear up some things for people. And if you still think that Black Lives Matter hates cops and you still think it's bullshit, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you. But I hope that this opened your mind to a little bit of what's going on and why it exists. I've been Xavier Lamont. Thank you very much. Sorry, this just in. Breaking news. Jesus Christ's motorcade was stopped leaving the White House, and apparently all the occupants were shot dead by the police. We don't have numbers on exactly how many have been killed. However, the scene, we're going to have footage from the scene later in the show. Another tragedy, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Xavier Lamont one more time. The tragedy continued this week with the shooting death of Philando Castile in Minnesota. Castile was gunned down while complying with police officer Geronimo Yanez of the St. Andrews Police Department. In this traffic stop, Castile informed Yanez that he was in possession of a registered firearm and that he had a permit for it. He was gunned down almost immediately after this disclosure. The next day, a protest in Dallas, Texas over the week's shootings turned bloody as 5 police officers were gunned down by former Army Specialist Micah Xavier Johnson. Johnson would later be killed in a standoff with Dallas police. To say this is one of the saddest weeks in recent history would be an understatement. Here to make a more poignant statement is Smoke Break contributor Kimberly Marion. KB!
Hey, what's up? It's Kimberly Marion with Smoke Break News. Today, instead of a correspondence piece, I decided to share some spoken word instead in light of the recent events. This piece is called Strange Fruit Revisited. Strange fruit on our screens. Strange fruit, we can hear the screams. Some go silent to prayer to a God force-fed to millions who have been cannibalized and left for dead, whose belly is full. Streaming misinformation, violence, abuse, racism, stupidity. Inhumanity threaded together DNA of injustice spilling on a blood-soaked t-shirt, car seat, sidewalk. Be still and patient in prayer. Be still? Remember the prophet made in the Western world's image, crafted by artists of a Renaissance who forgot about Hannibal and their olive skin. To be still is a luxury we cannot afford. As a matter of fact, we never could afford it, but everything is our loss and their gain at our expense. And maybe it's time to bankrupt the system, foreclose on the American dream, auction off their seats to the most capable, and establish our credit as a nation. And I can't use the words again because the nation never was. A truly liberated man cannot beat their chest and claim freedom while they decimate and defecate on stolen lands. We see that strange fruit on our screens. Strange fruit, we can hear the screams. Some go violent with weapons that was created by an entity that was only meant to self-destruct. But luckily, it was monetized. Thanks, capitalism. Of course, it had to be monetized because the land of freedom had lost its free labor. But the good old boys will make a way any way they know how. As men with billy clubs and low on the totem pole learn to assimilate, change your name at the gates, preach the land of freedoms, fear, and hate. Welcome to America. Watch the bloodstains of these niggers, mix, guineas, chinks, yellow devils, kikes, Polacks, spics, ragheads, and that stream flows into a universal consciousness that submerges us with anger, fear, stupidity, and rage, fanned by crisp bills that remind us who God is, right? We know that the strange fruit no longer rots on poplar trees. They are temporary images for some that shared about on small and big screens. Everyone taking a bite knowing that it's rotten to the core. Sullied by the light that ripens the skin too fast, but the interior still maturing. We want our freedom unchained, not tethered by race, class, gender, grade of hair, eye color, income, mistakes in our past, because everyone has a past. America. Strange fruit.
Thank you, KB Marion. One more time for KB. All right, guys. Let's take a walk over to the Smokers Lounge and have a little discussion with tonight's comedians and panelists. Lounge. Tonight joining us, we have comedian Jake Barron.
Yeah.
We have comedian Kimberly Marion. Comedian Peter Daniel. And of course, one and only, Xavier Lamont.
There's actually more, but okay. I got a common program that I've been working on for years.
I should have said you two next to each other. That was my first mistake. All right, guys. So it was a real heavy week, obviously.
Yeah.
4th of July week was riddled with bullets and blood. I'm just gonna come right out and ask a very obvious question, and that's in light of Alpha Sterling being killed, point blank range by police. Orlando Castillo being killed, point blank range by police. 5 police officers sniped dead by a former Army specialist. What needs to change, guys? Kim?
I think, that's a huge question because there's so much that needs to change with our mentality specifically. But one of the things that I noticed is a lot of people talk about how like the cops interact, and like a lot of people bring up the fact that there's a lot of black on black crime and they try to use it as a scapegoat. But I think it's absurd to use that as a scapegoat, because if you really look at it, and Excel said that in his piece, we have cops are like supposed to be morally just, like they're supposed to be in good standing. And my whole thing is if they're a part of a community and you're showing that you have disregard for somebody's life and you're supposed to be good, you're showing the rest of the community, yeah, you can have a disregard for life too. And I think that they have to be models within our community as well, and go back to that mentality of being a part of the community versus we're just policing it to find criminals, quote unquote, or fees, whatever, fines. I think that's one of the first steps.
We touched on it a little bit in the headlines there in the beginning of the show. And there are people that do argue, well, we don't have all the facts. And do we have enough facts yet to say that these police officers, both in Minnesota and in Louisiana, acted justly? Peter?
Yeah, no, I mean, we have all the facts. With these 2 cases, we have all the facts with the last 4 years. Within the realm of social media, Trayvon Martin, I think, was the catalyst for this. And then we have all the facts when you just go back all the way to the 50s and the 60s and what was going on with social injustice. I mean, we have all the facts, and it's just been getting worse. We have a kill culture in our society among those that are in a position of authority, that they don't view de-escalation and arrest and then putting someone through the system for due process as a viable option. That they think, because they feel threatened for half a second or whatever it is, that it's like shoot to kill rather than shoot to disable is the mantra. That's what it is. That's what we've seen. It's shoot to kill.
But there are so many examples of what's doing felons or perpetrators, suspects without using deadly force. It does seem to be a little bit skewed toward black and
yeah, it's unproportionately skewed towards people of color. The shoot to kill, and it's just. I mean, it comes back to like since forever. I mean, like Chris Rock's first album, Born Suspect. If you have any color in your skin, we're born suspect.
You just said the Chris Rock thing. One of my favorite jokes about him is he talks about a black man can fake having a gun, getting butt naked out of the swimming pool. Because people just assume that we're a threat. And here's the part that's completely illogical. Media is everywhere, social media, news media. We see these images. As a black man, I see these images. If I get stopped by a cop, I'm terrified. I am completely terrified. I'm trying to do everything I can to try to resolve that situation.
And you're big.
And in the same situation, resolve the situation and not let it escalate.
Yeah.
And if the cops for some reason are overly aggressive with me, I can understand a person like Alton, who's a big guy like me, almost the same. I mean, I'm a couple years older than he was in the past. I can see if it escalates and they're trying to take me down, of me fearing like, oh shit, I'm about to become a hashtag. And he did. Like, that's a real fear. Like cops, they talk about the cops fear for their life. Fucking Alton feared for his life. He was terrified. Like, he was terrified because he's seen so many people get gunned down by cops when they weren't a threat, that he probably thought, fuck, they're gonna shoot me, and guess what? He was right.
And
The one thing, it's an old quote, it's been played out for a very long time. It's that power corrupts and ultimate power corrupts ultimately. It's the people that we are employing as officers of the law are the fucking douchebags that used to beat people up in high school for not liking the same baseball team. They're the fucking assholes of society, and we need to change that culture. That like police officers is as viewed from like a white person's perspective in the 50s and 60s and 70s were like the good people. They were the good people. They were the nice people. They were the ones that you'd go to if you were worried about not being safe. And now, even as someone like of my skin color, I'm worried about having like black friends in the car with me because I don't want to be I'm horrified of being a witness to something. I don't want to be the one that is like right there as I'm seeing someone who I know is not a threat, who I know has love in their heart, and it's just gunned down right away. It's horrifying. You can't have that type of personality with a gun and a badge.
Do you think there's a systemic problem? I guess it would be municipality to municipality, state to state, and the vetting process of how we're hiring police officers.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things. I know some police officers, and I'm like, how the hell did you end up as a police officer? Like, and I think that, like, I had friends who failed the psychology test, that psychiatric exam, and they just went right over to being a sheriff. And so it was like there was no, like, I don't know if you guys read, but like Chicago is shorthand on police officers. Like they put desks, people who work in desks back out on the streets. They were on the desk for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think that part of it is their fault because you've created this stigma. I was talking to a friend last night. I was like, oh, don't you, he's trying to become what is that, fireman. I was like, oh, you don't want to become a cop? He's like, no, nobody wants to be a cop. They're all douches. That is the sentiment.
I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound contrary to everything I post on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. It sounds like we're bashing cops right now. I believe that there are good police officers. I actually am very old friends with the police chief, the current police chief in Aurora, Kristen Zenit. We went high school together. Okay, she's a good person. When she became chief, the first thing she did, she put a couple of her top lieutenants and top people that she's having advised her were a couple of officers who happen to be black, who are from the community. They're from the Aurora area. They are from the hood, so to speak, and they are the people who are advising her and training officers. And thank goodness, as far as I know, we haven't had any incidents like that under her watch in Aurora. Like, that's the type of policing we need. I don't remember, there's a friend of mine on Facebook, and I apologize if you watch this and I'm not giving you proper due credit for this, but she made a comment and said, whatever happened to beat cops? Like, why did there be cops in Inglewood walking around that know the neighborhood, that are friends with people, that are, she said, I see them in Lincoln Park, I see them in Wrigleyville, they hang out, like, if you live in Wrigleyville, you hang out in Wrigleyville a lot. There's cops that you see there all the time, that you be like the bar owners know, the security guards know at all places. Like, you need those exact same things. I understand Wrigleyville's a cash cow for the city. Well, a black eye for the city is neighborhoods like Inglewood and K-Town and rough neighborhoods. Why are there beat cops that aren't there just to arrest people or just to stop drug dealers, but just hanging out, socializing, being part of the community? That alone will help stop a lot of this violence, because those cops, if they actually know who the real threats are and who the guys who are just, just goofy assholes, it'll help them make determinations and help them to stop them from assuming that just because the guy's in a certain car or looks a certain way that he's a threat.
One thing I want to add to that, though, not all cops are bad, but a lot of them go by the blue code, and a lot of them do not speak up enough about
the blue code is silent.
Yeah, and not enough of those good cops speak up. And to me, that's just as bad, because you're allowing that to continue.
Yeah, you're being complicit with the system.
Yeah.
I mean, you said it's not that we're bashing cops. I don't think we're bashing cops. It's the system, it's the culture that we have. We having a difference in death in general in our culture right now. With 26 kids in Sandy got shot, and we did nothing about guns or anything. All the people that got shot in Orlando a few weeks ago, Virginia Tech, Illinois University. We just have an acceptance of death that is part of our culture right now. And it's extended into the police force that it's okay to shoot to kill some suspect rather than bring that suspect in and take them through the process. And that's what I think it is. There is a systemic bias for people of color, absolutely. And but just in general, if the all lives matter hashtag event, Dylan Noble, the white kid was on the ground and got shot in the back a few times earlier this week. The Latino people are getting followed by undercover cops in California. They didn't know it was a cop. They turned around and they thought they were going to get jacked by someone that was part of this race community that they were in because they had money. It's just just the idea that if someone's doing anything that's remotely illegal, that's like, oh, okay, well, it's okay if they die.
Let me ask one more thing about the vetting process for the police. I don't have any. This is just a thought, my thought, and I've heard it parroted a little bit by other commentators. We have a lot of military personnel that go right from the military, active duty, have seen combat, go right into police work. Do you think there's a disconnect for some of these folks who may have PTSD, maybe not a lot of PTSD, or maybe undiagnosed? Is it harder to turn off that mentality of going through the streets of Fallujah and shoot to kill and just stop anybody by any means necessary, and then coming back to civilization here?
I don't want to scapegoat that because a lot of people who serve come back and they're very good people. I don't want to scapegoat that thing because I think it's an overall thing. I think it goes all the way from mall cop to police chief that they have a negative attitude. They believe this idea of almost that they treat black people or people of color in general. I'm going to say black people because, like I said, there were 5 Latino people killed in the past week that didn't get any coverage. I want them to have an idea of shoot first should never be the option. They're not dirty hair. This is not like Make My Day Kid. Like, if you look at the Alton Sterling situation, if you listen to the audio, the guy right before he shoots on, he goes, "If you don't blah blah blah," like he's threatening him with the gun. There's not a hey, don't reach for your gun or don't reach in there. It's like it's almost like he's threatening him and then he just unloads on him. And by the way, in what scenario do you have to shoot 4 times for a guy that you're point blank range on? 6. I'm sorry, 6. Yeah. 6 shots for a guy that you were sitting on top. You're literally sitting on top of him. You have to shoot 6 times.
Well, my question would be, what are these officers who have been investigated? Was it 5 times in like the last 2 or 3 years? What are they doing on the league?
One thing, and going back to the fact that we're bringing people in from the military, it is a real thing. It's not a I know we don't want to scapegoat it and say that militarization is the reason why people are shoot first, ask questions later. But that is a real thing. I know plenty of people that are in the service, that have been in the service, and their mentality has changed. They can be great people. Some of the people are the sweetest people I know, and your mind works differently if you've gone through that training of these are the enemy and they will have no remorse. There is no exception for you to let them continue on their path if you are in this situation. And that is it's kind of like a brainwashing thing.
Yeah, how do you turn that off?
You can't.
I have no experience in that. I couldn't answer that question.
There is no turning it off. I have all the people that I know that have been in combat. There is no turning it off. Those people are who they are after that training forever.
But I even think those individuals that you're speaking of, if they were actually community policing, and that doesn't mean just arriving after the fact or just coming to the scene of a crime to arrest somebody, but if they were community policing and there all the time.
Yeah.
When you know the community, I'll give you an example. I grew up in a neighborhood called Jefferson Court. It's in Aurora. it was a notorious neighborhood. My neighborhood was so dangerous. My neighborhood was so dangerous that a rival, I got chased home. Me and a bunch of friends got chased home one time by a rival gang. They had guns, they were in cars. We were playing basketball. We had gym shorts and a basketball. That's all we had. And they were driving down the street, they chased us home. And when we got to our neighborhood was so notorious that as soon as we ran into the neighborhood, they turned around and left.
Yeah.
And we were kids, we didn't understand why, wait, they had us. Why did they just stop? And the OGs, the guys who were actually the thugs in the neighborhood, said, yeah, they knew if they came in this neighborhood, they were going to get shot up. And in that neighborhood, we had police that were part of the neighborhood, and they knew who the actual threats were and who the kids were and who the, might talk a lot of shit but not actually do anything guys were, because they were there every day because it was a really fucked up neighborhood.
They're the training day cops.
Yeah, they were there every day. They knew, so there wouldn't be a Tamir Rice situation. They would see a kid and know, nah, that kid's 12, man, he's cool, that's a fucking toy gun. Or even if it was a real gun, he's not shooting anybody, he's playing. They would have been able to do that because they knew the neighborhood. Whereas you had the guy who shot Xavier Lamont was an officer who got discharged from a previous police force because he was considered unstable. And he was hired on in another place, no questions asked. You have to be part of the community. You have to know who you're serving and protecting in order to serve and protect them. Otherwise, it's a police state, it's martial law, and none of us are safe in those communities. Right?
Now, Peter, you touched on this for a second. I want to come back to you on this. We did have 5 Latinos killed this week, and barely any news coverage. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is twofold. Is within our own community of Latinos, we don't do a good job mobilizing and bringing attention via social media to make the national media listen to us. I think that's one of the things that we just don't do a good job of, because I think the national media would be very happy to ignore Alton Sterling or Philando Castile and just go on about business as usual, just watch shit about Kim Kardashian and Trump. That's what they want to do. But the black community does a great job of mobilizing and making their voices heard via social media. And there's videos that are also going viral. And so that's blown up. So we're just not doing that. That's one of the things that we need to do to draw attention and say, hey, so our people are getting shot too. We're victims of police brutality, being mean, investigation of injustice. 3 of the people that got shot had a knife in their hand, but they got shot from a distance, and they had a history of mental instability. Why were they shoot to kill rather than shoot to disarm? Shoot them in the knee. You've been trained how to shoot. Shoot them in the shoulder.
Shoot tranquilizers instead of bullets.
Yeah, shoot
rubber beanbags, or pepper spray, or billy clubs, or anything.
It could be lethal force. It could be force to get them subdued. I understand that. I'm not saying don't use force. I'm just saying why does this person now not get to live? And then the other part of the reason that we're not as vocal about it, I think, is there's a giant percentage of us that are here that don't have papers that are not legal. So there's a fear of if I try to speak up for equality, they're like, well, you shouldn't even be here anyway. Bam, you're gone. Even if I'm legal, my family member that's not legal can get it too. So I think there's a lot of fear in our community that we can't be. That becomes an inhibitor to speak up and try to even draw attention to the injustice. And we're not forcing the national media to listen to us because they don't listen to any of it. The history is they wanted to ignore it until NWA made it loud where you couldn't ignore it. Until the video of Rodney King getting beat, you can't ignore it. And we're just not making any videos that we have are not going viral. We're not making them go viral. We need to make them listen to us.
All right, I want to pivot over to the protest in Dallas. I believe it was Thursday.
Yeah.
We had 7 shot.
No, 11 shots.
11 shot, 5 dead,
5
7
dead police officers. This isn't the first time we've seen retaliation against police officers.
There's also shootings in Missouri and Georgia too.
And Baltimore.
Yeah.
Or just out in Maryland.
Now, of course, we're shocked and appalled by this, but should we be surprised?
The only thing that comes to mind when I saw the retaliation, there's a philosopher, his name is Khalil Gibran. He touches on something of retaliation and of law and order and crime and punishment. It's oftentimes I've heard speak of one who commits a wrong as though he were not a stranger, an intruder under the world. The wicked and the weak can only fall as low as the lowest among you. What is evil but good tortured by its own hunger and thirst? When good is hungry, it will find food even in the darkest of caves. The people who are retaliating and using, lethal force against their oppressors in their eyes. I mean, I'm not surprised by the fact that we don't have more. It should be. I'm surprised there's no guerrilla insurrections, like Black Panther style. Us for the people. It's
Ironically enough, the Black Panthers now are located in Texas. Yeah.
Do you think there will be some sort of mobilization?
We're not going to talk about that.
Don't play your cards. No,
There's
no
no retaliation. There's nothing.
No,
There's nothing coming. Go to sleep.
I was not. I mean, it was sad. It was definitely a sad situation. Absolutely. I was not surprised because for so long, we've been yelling, "Stop killing us!" And there wasn't a level of retaliation of what we saw in Dallas occurred. But just in the social media era of when this is going up, like I said, from what I can remember, the Trayvon Martin was like the point right there of social media really being used as a way to bring national attention to this.
Trayvon and Ferguson,
and then from there moving forward, there hasn't been retaliation like what we saw in Dallas. That was 4 years ago. So for 4+ years, there hasn't been. It's just been
Well, you had those cops in New York. You executed 2 cops in New York. It was about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
One guy who
When I
was
say-
very mentally unstable.
Yeah, but like to the level of Dallas. I mean, Dallas is being, when you see the media reports, Dallas is being talked about as the deadliest shame for a month because it's not a month. So there hasn't been a day like that or incidents like that in a sustained way against the cops. There's been outliers. And I think right now, it was right after Independence Day, which is supposed to be for all of us. And then one person was killed on Independence Day, the next day the person was on July 5th. And it was, just those are the 2 stories that went viral. It was just that feeling of like, oh, okay, yeah, there was Independence Day, but just a reminder, it's not for any of you. And that was like the feeling that I saw like from that. And I just don't think, I don't think it's going to get worse necessarily as violent, because I don't think the movements for people of color calling for social justice want that.
Because it dismantles the whole argument
Right.
and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And not only that, you're not going to beat the government. Using violence, you're not going to win.
No.
And that's been proven so many times
Yeah.
over.
But it's not, to me, it's not surprising because, for the last 8 years since Obama was the president, the NRA has been yelling, get your guns, because the government's going to try to take them from you, it's going to try to oppress you. Well, and then when people of color are actually feeling that we're being oppressed, like we're by the government,
Where is the
Where's
NRA?
the other side?
These guys got shot this week at firearms. One of them registered legally, the other one not. As far as we know, where is the NRA stepping up?
I'm so glad you brought this up because the entire pitch of the NRA and the entire gun apparatus is that the Second Amendment was designed to protect us from the tyranny of the government. And if this isn't tyranny, I don't know what the fuck is. I don't know what the fuck is tyranny. The fact that me as a person who put myself in a position where I could live in a suburb where my kid can be safe, a nice, safe suburb, but I still have to have a tearful conversation with my son where I'm holding back tears, explaining to him that he's not safe, and the people that he's not safe from are the fucking cops. That's tyranny. I'm being fucking terrorized because I am horrified that my son's gonna walk out one day and do something and some cop or we don't have a neighborhood watch in our neighborhood because we don't need one, but some guy who's overzealous and thinks he's protecting the neighborhoods is gonna fucking take my kid out. That's tyranny, man. And so if people who supposedly support the Second Amendment and the NRA should be the first on the front line. The GOP should be the first on the front line supporting Black Lives Matter because technically speaking, this is exactly what they're standing for.
No, it's not, because they're the reason why all these gun laws were created in the first place. It is to dismantle the Black Panther Party. That's the reason why the gun laws were originally created.
Well, you get into the actual
actually going to come out and say that, but really the NRA is very much more aligned with the ideals that have been pushed by the business partner.
But and that's the exposure that your sheet is showing. Your clanhood is showing when you don't stand up and say, hey, this is government overreach. These are police officers acting far beyond and above what is necessary. They're killing law-abiding citizens. I mean, if Castillo had a gun legally, why was he shot? Why was he shot for holding it?
Right.
He had a gun legally. It was a traffic stop. And then the backstory is there was supposed to be a robbery. He fit the description.
Right. He was a black male between 5 foot and 7'8".
Exactly.
He was somewhere within the range of being black, and that was all that mattered.
Exactly. Written description is
code
for a black dude or a Latino dude.
That's and then going back to our example of vetting at least that officer, there had to have been some sort of breakdown. We don't have all the facts on Yanez yet, but I'm willing to bet you should probably not have been given a gun in the first place. He was shot immediately.
Well, I mean, even going back to all the stories, it's like, yeah, he was a felon, he shouldn't have had a gun, but when you're in a state, when you're living in a country that's supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and you're in an open carry state, the fact that he had a gun shouldn't have been cause for the concern.
Cops are not judge and jury.
And
Because you don't know that when you show up to court.
And hold on, we don't know whether or not he should have had a gun. Every state has different laws on that. In the state of Illinois, for a felon for a non-violent offense, you can still get a FOIA card. You can still get a firearm ID. You have to submit a profession, go through paperwork. Castile was, I believe, he got stopped by the cops 52 times in 12 years. Like, raise your hand if you got stopped more than 2 or 3 times in a year. Wouldn't you think that was weird? Wouldn't you think that was really fucked up if you got stopped more than 3? I know the cameras can't see it, but I just want to see it from my eyes. Raise your hand if you've ever been stopped 3 times in a year. Okay, now there's white guys raising their hands. They got stopped 3 times a year. Out of the 3 times, how often were the cops really shitty to you? Raise your hand if they were shitty to you. Oh shit! Nobody! No, I'm not saying cops aren't shitty to white people, but you got stopped 3 times in 1 year. Let me ask you another question. That next year, did you get stopped 3 times again? Raise your hand. No, you know why? Because you changed your behavior, and so what we're believing is that this dude got stopped at least on average 3 times a year over the course of 3 years, 3.5 times a year over the course of 12 years, and never changed a single thing about his behavior.
Yeah.
I'm gonna believe his girlfriend's story that he was forthright with the cop, because her story is that he told the cop that he had a gun, that he had a right to carry the gun, and that he was trying to comply. I have to believe that a person who got stopped that many times holding a gun, that nobody wants to die like that.
Listen, I'm going to add one more thing here. Speaking of charities, the federal government is a time for them to step in and create some kind of comprehensive uniform police, I guess you could say, reformation.
That's a very, very difficult thing. I would love for that to happen, but I'm not 100% sure if it's constitutional that they could override police regulations for every state.
With the interstate commerce clause, which is about as elastic as either an Excel's waistlines combined, pretty much use it. I'm surprised Rusty here.
Oh, it's 15 pounds, man.
I cut my hair and I lost 10.
There you go.
Even if it's not constitutional, the entire embodiment of the Constitution is the founding fathers saying, we have no fucking idea what life is going to be like not only 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 150, they have no fucking idea. They embody having that document change. It's supposed to be a living document that will live and adapt to the times.
And the Equal Protection Clause of 14th Amendment, you can make the argument that you can't deprive people of life, liberty, and the pursuit of
Well, we deprive of life regularly.
And if you're shooting people with basically no warning for unjust causes, I think it would be okay to step in.
I would say the only
These are the
thing,
uniform laws.
I was going to say the thing about the federal government taking over, actually the federal government is the reason why they military is restricted right now. So if we really
Maybe we can start with that.
do we really want the federal government to?
Yes, they should step in and stop giving them old military-grade weapons.
But I don't want them to perform any kind of reforms because they can't get education right. I don't know if they're gonna.
You can't get an education if you're shot dead.
I'm not for, and this is gonna sound weird because I'm super liberal, but I'm not for the federal government coming in and overseeing all the states doing some kind of new code. I can see, even if it was constitutionally equivalent the way that they worded it, I can see there being problems with that. What I do think is necessary is in communities, especially diverse communities, there needs to be community policing. They need to be a part of the community. You can't be like there's no quote unquote good cop. It's all bad cops.
It's not.
And it's not bad cops. I'm not saying the cops are bad. It's just they're only there after the fact. They're only there after the murder, after the robbery, after the fact. They're not there beforehand so people feel safe and protected. When I spend a lot of time downtown Chicago, and I have friends come from all over, comics and other people, and I take them to places where I know, like Lincoln Park, Wrigleyville, downtown Chicago, and they worry because they're not from here. And they go, "We're not going to any place where there's going to be shooting. I didn't know Chicago has tons of shooting." Like, no, that's in specific areas for a reason. Where you're at, you're going to see cops, it's going to be safe. And we can also talk about policing standards that can create a scenario that pushes all the crime in particular areas and kind of let the Wild West exist in certain areas, and that's why they're there. Like literally the policy of the Chicago Police Department, I can tell you right now that there's an area that I can take anyone here who wants to go. I can take you there where you can buy drugs and it's like going to a fucking drive-thru. Literally, like going to a drive-thru McDonald's where you'll see a line of cars and you'll get pulled up one at a time. You place your order with one guy, you move up, the next guy takes your money, you move up, the next guy gives you the drugs, you drive off with your drugs. Yes, I think that's where
Illinois and Chicago.
Like Portillo's got their model from there, they got their model from Portillo's, but I swear to God, this is a real thing. And what's even worse about that is you can drive 2 blocks away from the community that I'm thinking of and see 6 or 7 cops hanging out at a Dunkin' Donut. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't say Dunkin' Donut. They're hanging out at 7-Eleven, whatever. Whatever. Yeah. They're 2 blocks away from a fucking conveyor belt of drug sales and crime, and they're not arresting anybody because that's an area where those guys know that they're safe, they do business, and nobody's gonna fuck with them. And if you have that, you are going to have the black on black crime that people so love to throw the statistics of, which is also bullshit, by the way. As a side note, black on black crime, you talk about blacks killing blacks, why does Black Lives Matter not care about that? They do. They march for that shit too. It just doesn't get media coverage. Nobody ever talks about it. There's rallies and shit for that too. And also, 87% of white people are killed by white people. You know why? Murder's personal. When you kill people, you don't. That's why.
One last thing, you talk about Black Lives Matter, and you want to be asked, why don't you think white people understand Black Lives Matter?
Okay. White people who think Black Lives Matter is anti-white or anti-anything, like they're projecting that Black Lives Matter more than other lives, are people who clearly don't know any black people. They don't know any black people. And for real quick, I'm gonna look into the camera when I say this. When I say you don't know black people, I know some of you might be watching this and you know that's bullshit. I know black people. I'm going to give you a small list of black people that you think you know, they don't qualify. Number 1, Oprah. You don't know that bitch, okay? She's a TV personality, yeah, she's in your house all the time. You think you connect with her, you don't. She's a fucking billionaire and she's not your friend, you don't know her. Number 2, that co-worker that you talk to about the NBA every now and then, or college basketball, you have a nice little chat with, but you don't do anything else with, you don't spend any time outside of work with, that's not your fucking friend, you don't know him, you just like, he's a work buddy, it's not the same. Number 3, that neighbor, that one black guy that lives in your neighborhood that you give the what's up to whenever you see him walking to his car, not only do you not know him, I'm going to tell you from personal experience, he kind of fucking hates you. Stop doing the what's up thing. That's a black dude thing. I don't want to do it with you. Okay? Doug, stop fucking doing it, Doug. Your wife is hot, but I hate you. And finally, anybody who represents themselves as a member of the GOP and they happen to be African American, they don't represent the black community. We hate them as much as you hate gay, lesbian, tranny, fucking terrorists giving abortions in your Piggly Wiggly bathroom. They're not one of us. They're not part of our team. Okay, they don't represent us. So just because they agree with you doesn't mean you know a black person that thinks the way you do. Fuck that person. You don't know a black person. If you know a black person personally, there's no way you can possibly think that Black Lives Matter represents hate or represents anything negative towards the police. Black Lives Matter's primary goal is to get the police to be part of our community and not killing us with one of us. That's it. That's the whole focus. Thank you.
Guys, that's been our panel. Thank you so much. That's been the smoke break. Thank you guys. We love you. Good night.
Shout when you wanna get off the ride. Shout when you wanna get off the ride. Shout when you wanna get off the ride. 'Cause you cross my mind, cross my mind. Make my blood thump 7, 8, 9. Make my heart beat double time. Now I'm the only sour cherry on the fruit stand. Right, am I the only sour cherry on the fruit stand? Shout when you wanna get off the ride. Shout when you wanna get off the ride. 'Cause you cross my mind, cross my mind. I'm a penny in a